Good afternoon. I'd like to briefly address why data plays such a critical role in shaping the rural policy. That's very important now at the time of the environmental, digital, and social transitions that Simone just presented. While the next presentation after me will go more in the technical achievements of the RUSTIK project, my task here is to set the scene in a way to explain why place-based, usable rural data is more than a technical need. It is also a policy necessity. Next slide, please. So, rural areas across Europe are undergoing very complex transitions at the moment. Like Simone explained, we have the social, environmental, and digital transition in the scope here in the RUSTIK project. To manage these, we need a solid foundation of place-sensitive knowledge. However, yet much of our policy making still, we can say, relies on European and national data sets. And these data sets don't totally capture the full diversity of rural realities. This is particularly relevant for EU-level policy frameworks, such as cohesion policy, where the rural priorities and rural areas risk being diluted without adequate territorial data. Planning policies that support local resilience, innovation, and inclusivity depends on high-quality localized data. We also need to understand where these transitions intersect. They intersect across sectors, territorials, and governance levels. This is where RUSTIK project adds a real value. By strengthening the rural data ecosystem, it lays, in a way, the groundwork for more responsive and evidence-based rural policy decisions. Next slide, please. Let's briefly reflect on the main limitations of the current data in relation to policies. Many rural policy issues like social cohesions and digital skills simply lack the granular indicators we need. Can you take one slide back? Yeah. For example, broadband coverage may well be documented, actually, but the lack, for instance, on digital skills or actual uptake in rural micro businesses is very often missing. Additionally, the spatial data is often locked into administrative boundaries, ignoring how people actually live, move, and work across the regions. Without disaggregated or functional data, resource allocation, we can say it remains imprecise and critical needs can go unaddressed. This slide underscores directly why tailored targeted data is essential for building truly place-based rural strategies and policies, and why existing data frameworks often fall short in supporting such policies. Okay, now we stay here in this slide. I noticed that we have been a little bit too quickly. So how RUSTIK strengthens the rural policy capacity. Instead of just collecting data, the RUSTIK project has focused from the beginning on making that data usable and impactful as well. It simply builds on access to localized indicators that rural actors can actually use in planning and advocacy, not just an analysis, but really for taking the policy actions. This helps align local information needs with broader European policy priorities and In that way, we can say it creates a stronger bridge between the grassroots knowledge and the EU strategies. We will soon hear that how through training and tailored tools, the RUSTIK project strengthens the digital and analytical skills that are as essential for rural regions to navigate the transitions. So basically to how they can act on rural policy issues. And also by harmonizing the data across local, national, and European levels, it makes rural-specific trends more visible for the policy and helping them shifting the focus from identifying the gaps to finding the real policy solutions. And now, please, the next slide. So making policy more effective through better data. How? Rural development is not just about individual sectors. It's about how different policies interact in real places. Whether we are talking about tourism, agriculture, energy, transport, mobility, the rural challenges rarely fit into one policy domain. That's why we need the data in the policy making that reflects how people live and move, not just where they reside. Without this better data, we can improve how different policy fields are coordinated actually across the governance levels, local, regional, national, and EU, and we touch all of them in the RUSTIK project. We can say that the RUSTIK project supports by providing tools that help to align the rural realities with the broader strategic goals, enabling also more integrated, responsive, and place-based policymaking. This leads us then actually to the next question. How exactly does the data enable rural policy to have a greater impact? And to next slide, please. In RUSTIK, we talk at the moment in the work package 4, three key pathways that in which we can say also the data improves the policy impact. We have to pay attention to the strategy integration. This means that the data helps bringing rural priorities into national and EU frameworks rather than treating them as isolated concerns. Second, there is the territoriality that emphasizes that we can better target resources when we understand how people actually live and move across the regions. Third, there is of course, naturally the governance pathway. This pathway refers to the fact that data empowers not just the planners traditionally, but also communities by making decision-making more inclusive. These pathways help us then to move from pure data collection to the policy influence as well. On the next slide, please.
Yes, I will ask you to wrap up so we can try to stay on time, Petri. Thank you.
Okay. I will wrap up very quickly then if you go to the last slide. So data as a foundation for rural proofing. The idea is that the policy impacts on rural areas should be systematically assessed. This is only possible when we have meaningful data. And the RUSTIK project contributes here too. This also depends on tapping into the knowledge of local actors whose insights can help interpret data and reveal potential impacts, we can say early in the policy process. Rural proofing shouldn't be just one-time checklist. but rather a continuing dialogue between the decision-making and local areas. In that sense, RUSTIK project helps not only to fill the data gaps, but also to reshape the way we think about rural policy making. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Petri, for this insightful presentation to set the scene. Now we will put this into practice with our next speaker, Marta Carbonés. She's working at Multicriteria Planning in Spain, and she has expertise in integrating data-driven methodologies to support rural sustainability, resilience, and innovation. She has contributed to several European projects on carbon positive and circular territories. And within RUSTIK, she's working to co-design data collection approaches, databases, and also the RUSTIK information system that she will present later on during the webinar. So if you are ready, Marta, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentin. Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thank you all for being here and joining today's session. In my presentation, I will be explaining how we have operationalized the heuristic transitions and pathways into data experiments that use specific tools and methodologies. And first, I would like to briefly present the objectives of our work to frame our contribution. The first of our objectives is to gather data that helps describe and understand the different RUSTIK transitions. Second, we are making this data available and accessible in a user-friendly way for the different researchers and stakeholders that are both within and also beyond the project. Third, we are building a structured European-wide database. And finally, we are also delivering, let's say, locally curated indicators for our living labs. So these are our 4 main objectives. But the important question here is how are we doing so? In the next slide, please, Valentin. She's frozen now. Just hold me. Yeah, I think she's frozen now, but I can.
My connection is not as good as I expected. I hope it's good now.
Yeah, it is good now. Yeah, no problem. You can go to the following slide directly. Perfect, thank you. So, how are we doing? So we are working in a 3-step approach. The 3 steps are the ones that you can see in the slide. First, we started in the beginning of the project by analyzing. I will keep talking while the presentation is charging again. But we started by analyzing what data was already available across Europe and what was already missing at that point. And particularly, we took a look in order to analyze which data was lacking for the different living labs. So we compare the types of data available in each region, and we assess the ability of each of the living labs to use that data effectively. And this helped us identify 2 different key things. One, the gaps in data availability, and second, the interests. So what kind of data each region actually needs. And with these priorities in mind, we moved on to building the tools, which would be the second step. We created at this stage a database with data linked to the RUSTIK's 3 key transitions. And in parallel, we supported each of the living labs in collecting additional data and then integrating it into a shared database. And then to make this wealth of data usable, we developed the RUSTIK Viewer, which is an open source platform, and I will show it to you later on. And third, as we knew that data and tools alone were not enough, we wanted to ensure to to inform on how to use those tools. So we organized a series of trainings and learning opportunities to build that capacity. This would be the third step. First of all, we organized together with our partners from Mcrit a learning hub to use the participatory mapping tool Maptioner. Then there were also different trainings on data scrapping, where we taught how to extract data from online sources such as Airbnb, Booking, and Google Maps. And there were also some trainings on geospatial tools and also on how to use the RUSTIK Viewer. And now we will show you one input for each of these three approaches. If we go to the next slide, we will see that as a result from our assessment of data interests and availability across the 14 living labs, we could identify which were the topics that were considered as most relevant and which at the same time lacked data. And here we have some examples. For example, for the socioeconomic transition, the topics that were considered as relevant were population aging, job opportunities, citizen involvement, and also topics such as related to community cohesion. In regards to the environmental transition, we saw that themes that stood out as widely important were sustainable mobility, climate change, vulnerability, landscape and cultural heritage, also topics related to food security. And then for the digital transition, the focus was more on digital infrastructure, so physical infrastructure. This is a summary, very summarized, but I hope this was useful for you. And then on our next slide, we wanted to present one of our key achievements, which was the creation of the RUSTIK database, which is compiling over 120 data layers that cover the three main transitions that we are working on in RUSTIK. Here on the screen, you can see some examples focused on the environmental transition. And these are the data layers that have been later included in the RUSTIK Viewer. So we have quite a lot of detail of all these databases, and we have all of them integrated in one space. And then in the following slide, as mentioned earlier, apart from the data analysis and gathering, we have also organized together with our partners several trainings on data collection and analysis. Here we have some of the tools that we presented during the trainings and that provide access to geospatial data in an easy way. Let's say here we have, for example, the Copernicus data space ecosystem, the CLMS dataset catalog, the EAA spatial data infrastructure, and the GRC European Drought Observatory, which are all of them very interesting. And all of them complement the work that we are doing in RUSTIK. And then in the following slide, we have one of the main highlights, which is, of course, the RUSTIK Viewer, which was created in order to ensure that everyone can access the data from the RUSTIK project. The RUSTIK Viewer is an open source tool that brings together multiple data types across different scales. It has been designed for use by local, regional, and policy stakeholders. And its aim is also to support future research efforts. So the RUSTIK Viewer is integrating three main types of data. First, it integrates existing secondary data from European agencies and programs, such as, for example, Eurostat. Second, it integrates new quantitative data sources coming from data scrapping. And third, it also integrates the local data gathered through the Living Labs experimentation processes. In the next slide, we have how it looks like. I invite you to explore it. And you will see it's multi-layered and structured into two main sections: the European core level system with data that covers all Europe, and then we have the Living Labs level with data that each of the Living Labs have gathered during their experimentation process. I will walk you through a kind of a live demonstration of the viewer later on to explore its functionalities in more depth. I have some examples that I wanted to show you in the next slide. You have, for example, one indicator for the European interface, which is the projected change in meteorological forest fire danger. This is how the viewer looks like. And then in the following slide, we have another indicator that comes from another European project, which is the Spawn Prophecy. In the following slide, please, which is the, I think it was the time showing the distance to the nearest hospitals.
Beyond the prophecy.
Yeah, it's in the following slide, please. Yeah, this one, perfect. So this is the distance to hospitals. And then we have another example in the following slide, which is showing the Living Lab interface for Zona, which is the Living Lab that we'll be presenting also today. And we are showing here an indicator which is highlighting the cultural points of interest in the region, so the cultural activities in this specific region. And to wrap up, I wanted to talk about one key lesson and also outline what comes next for us in the RUSTIK project. So one of our main takeaways is the importance of flexibility in data collection. We have seen that, of course, Living Labs are very diverse, and what have proved most effective was to combine multiple data types. So from European level statistics to web-based data sets to locally generated information. And as we reflect on this experimentation phase, we see a real value in understanding how this European level data has been complemented by the local insights in each of the different Living Labs. So this mix of top-down and bottom-up data has been very relevant for our project and also for the contribution in future projects. And looking ahead, we will continue integrating the Living Lab data from the experiments into the viewer. So the viewer is not complete at this moment, but it will be completed during the following months. And we are also beginning to work on a sustainability plan to ensure the long-term value and use of the RUSTIK databases. And that's all from our side. Thank you very much. And
Thank you, Marta. Thank you. I hope my Wi-Fi connection will work better in the next presentation. I apologize. But thank you for bringing key lessons and the next steps about data and including them in the data viewer of RUSTIK. It's the perfect transition for that come from one Living Lab of the project. But before that, we'll have a few minutes for a Q&A session. So I remind everyone that we will open the floor. So if you want to ask your question directly to the speaker, just raise your hand using the tool that is at the bottom of your screen. Otherwise, you can use the chat whenever you want during the webinar, and we'll pick them up. So the floor is yours.
We have two questions already in the chat, Valentine, in case you want to take them first. One of the questions was for Petri, and is how are you supporting the Living Labs in terms of working with them with new forms of data that they perhaps have not previously worked with? There was already some discussion in the chat about this question, but maybe you want to provide more information. And the other question was for Marta, and is did you have any issue with data collection, or did you use only publicly available data already?
Thanks, Blandine. Marta, I see you nodding. If you want to answer about the second question of the chat.
Yeah, I will try to answer. So I think the data protection aspect was one of the challenges that we had in regards to making data available. What we have tried to do is to only present publicly available data for the European level database in the viewer. And then in regards to the Living Lab databases, we have tried to work with each of the Living Labs in order to see if their data could be published or not, if in case it could be published, if we needed to make it anonymous, for example. So it was a little bit like case by case to try to see how we could take into account the data protection aspect when presenting the data. In some cases, we could not upload the data from the Living Labs because it may have not respected the data protection side.
Okay, thank you for your answer. I hope it answers well what the audience was asking. I cannot see the chat yet since I'm sharing my screen. So, Blandine, if there is any other question, or Petri, perhaps if you want to answer on the Living Lab and the first question.
Well, sorry. The first question was there actually that we didn't in the work package 4 actually work on the methodology and data-related questions as such, but we were more than analyzing how they were applied and what kind of influence they had on the different policies in the data experiments in the pilot regions.
Okay, thank you, Petri, for your answer. I see Jan McCallum, you have your hand raised if you want to directly interact. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Valentine. Yes, maybe just a follow-up question. Thank you, Petri, and to a follow-up question to Marta, just about the web scraping sort of training and capacity building that you were doing. I just wanted to hear how that went, because that's actually a little bit tricky, that process. So I'm wondering how that transferred to the Living Labs in terms of training, and do you expect that they'd be able to then continue that type of work on their own in the future? Thank you.
I think that's a great question, because one of the innovations in our project was the data scraping part. So what we did was to develop, I think it was 2 different trainings in regards to data scraping. What we did was to present very easy to use tools such as Apify. So we tried only to focus on 1 or 2 different platforms and to present a step by step the different instructions that they needed to follow in order to scrap data from the different web sources. Then also these trainings were accompanied by, like, we sent a guide on how to do so, and then we had several specific sessions with the Living Labs in order to see with them which were the challenges that they encountered in the process. So it's like it was very personal and tailored, because each Living Lab had the intention to focus on one specific type of data. But yes, I think it was easier as we presented 1 or 2 platforms, and we could actually do a demonstration on how to do so.
Great. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, with their specific, looking at their specific region with specific data and their needs, yeah, that makes sense, and try to simplify it somehow. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see one more hand raised, and then I will ask you to keep your question, either to write it on the chat or to keep it for the next Q&A session, as we have to move forward. So Timur, you can ask your question. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for really nice presentations and a brief overview of our project. So then my question will be regarding, maybe already mentioned, the pilot regions, as I'm and my colleagues are focusing the Georgia, and I'm coming from this country. So they're quite relevant to have the data about rural areas and integrated the policy. So as a pilot region is marked on your map, do we have any activities which is also like carried out in this pilot regions, or how you are covering this the regions you like marked as a pilot? Thank you.
So if I understood well, you want to know what activity would be carried in Georgia, but we don't have a pilot region there.
I mean, the map, it seemed it's there, so that's why I asked. Yeah, but if not, that's okay as well.
No, so we don't have one in Georgia, but Simone, if you want to step in, maybe. Oh, I see you saying no. Okay. So thank you everyone for asking question, and thank you for the.
There was one question, Valentin, in the
Yeah,
chat.
go ahead. Yeah.
From Alexia Ruby. She asks, how easy will it be to update the viewer with updated data sets when they become available?
So I can answer. The viewer is linked to the sources of the different databases. So when the database is in the proper agencies and portals are updated, this will be updated at the same moment in our viewer. Then the viewer will be maintained during several years after the project ends. And our objective is also to document all the data that is in the viewer, so that at least everyone can have like the proper list of indicators and go to the source and have then the data updated.